a speed which no craft in the world could move at that time in those speeds. Additionally, we've been able to locate his co-pilot as well as documents from the government of his official debriefing and report, which was made by the Navy and the military at that time.
The flight was normally about 10 hours, but that night we had a 60-knot wind, and it was a headwind. And about maybe 300 to 400 miles outside of Keflavik, out of Argentia, I'm sorry, I saw something below the horizon on the water that looked like approaching a city at night. It was just kind of an ambient light, no definition whatsoever, but the same thing that you would see if you were approaching a large city at night. And all of a sudden we saw on the water a yellow halo that was very, very small, about 15 miles away. And it came up to 10,000 feet like that, a fraction of a second. And I thought it was going to go right through us. And I disengaged the autopilot, pushed the nose over because I was going to go under it at the angle it was coming toward me. So what happened, the minute that I did that, it was up at our altitude and I could see nothing outside of the cockpit but this craft. And so I didn't know which way to go. And then all of a sudden I heard a racket. I didn't know what it was. And I said, "Fred, what the hell was that?" He looked around and he says, "Oh," he said, "everyone was ducking in the back of us and they collided and they're all laying on the deck back there scrambling on the deck." So when I looked back, it wasn't there. And he says, "It's over here on the right-hand side." Now, it was about a mile or so away on the right-hand side, and it kind of drifted forward maybe to a position maybe 5 miles away, and that's where it stayed with us for quite some time. This is when we could first see, it wasn't above our altitude, it was below our altitude, but it's still above the horizon where you could see the side of the craft, you could see the dome, and you could see the color around the perimeter of the craft. And then we knew that it was a friendly encounter. I said, "Doc, did you see what we saw?" And he says, "Yeah." He says, he looked me straight in the eye. He says, "Yeah." He says, "It was a flying saucer." So I went back forward and I said, "Dal, whatever you do, don't tell anybody we saw anything. He'll lock us up as soon as we get on the ground." He said, "It's too late." He said, "I just called Ganner to control to see if they could track this by radar." So that's how it got out. So when we landed at Argentia, the Air Force was there and they interrogated us. And the captain that did the interrogation did a real good job, but you could tell that this wasn't his first time that he'd ever interrogated anybody as far as these craft were concerned. When that question was asked, it was 300 feet that came into my mind. And when I got the report out of the archives in 1991, I'd never seen anybody else's report. Everyone had been anywhere from 250 to 350 feet in diameter. Now, the velocity when it left us was estimated from between 1,000 miles an hour to 2,000 miles an hour. And when I looked at the report, Al Jones estimated 1,800 miles an hour. Mine was 1,000, another one was 1,500 miles an hour, in that range. It turns out that the radar report, which I've never seen, said it was 1,800 miles an hour. So the other plane commander was sitting in the seat, took my seat, he hit it right on the nose. Now my boss, that's another thing. When he found the report in the archives in Wright-Patterson on Project Blue Book and talking to Colonel Watson, when he came back to me, he gave me the speed of 1,800 miles. I said, "Where'd you find that out?" And he said, "Well, it was a radar report that said that." The document that I found was the official document that the Air Force had put together, different sources that came to them. And it was originally filed, it was under Project Grudge, you can see in their written Project Grudge, but on the front page it says Project Twinkle. Now this is where they put a lot of ones that they had to get rid of somehow. It was Project Twinkle. So it was in Project Blue Book and Project Grudge and what other project I don't know that was in.
Michael Smith was an air traffic controller with the Air Force, both in Oregon as well as subsequently in Michigan. At both of these facilities, he witnessed UFOs tracked on radar moving at extraordinary speeds, and he also confirms that NORAD, the North American Air Defense Command, was fully apprised of these events, and in fact, in one of these events in Michigan, was engaged and steered B-52s returning to a base around the UFOs, which were at low altitude and were intersecting the flight path of these B-52s. This man has a very good career, and he has documented his placement at these facilities at the time that these events occurred. It establishes the physical reality of these objects, and also, I should note, the fact that NORAD has been involved. This is of some significance since we have learned that President Clinton, ex-President Clinton, had asked Webster Hubbell, when he was third in command at Justice, to look into the UFO issue. And when Webster Hubbell and others made inquiries to NORAD, they denied any knowledge of these objects. This is serious because if these senior covert projects are lying to directed inquiries from the President of the United States, this constitutes a serious breach in our chain of command.
In spring of 1970, while I was stationed in Klamath Falls, Oregon, I came up to the radar site on the evening shift, and where there's normally 2 or 3 people in the radar room, there was quite a few, from the cooks to maintenance, all kinds of people. And I asked what was going on, and they said that they was watching a UFO, and I immediately was stunned and asked if the Pentagon was notified. Somebody called the president, and they said no, they don't do that. It was stationary, wasn't moving at all, and it would slowly lower itself down. It would, until it got behind a mountain, so that you lost radar contact. It would stay down for about 15 minutes, and the next thing you knew, it was right back up there. It was up, 80, 90,000 feet. And then the next sweep of the radar scope, it would be, like 200 miles away, stationary, completely stopped. And I said, well, we should call the news media, or call somebody. This is earth-shaking news, and to me. And he said, no, just calm down. NORAD knows about it. They called NORAD, and that's when the senior NCO pulled me to the side and said that NORAD knows about it. That's the only people we notify. We don't talk about this. We don't tell anybody about this. The people that know, and we just watch, see what happens, and that's it. And I insisted, well, there has to be a report filed or something filed, And they said, well, that there is a report that you can file. It's about 1 inch thick. And the first 2 pages is about the sighting. The rest of it is basically a psychological profile of you, your family, your bloodlines, everything. So when the Air Force goes through it, they can discredit you completely by either saying that you was on drugs, or your mother was a communist, or anything to discredit you, and you'd never get a promotion. And I'd spend the next 3.5 years up at the North Pole, living in a tent checking the weather balloons. My second encounter was while I was stationed in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan. It was in 1972. I was working alone that night when I got a phone call from the switchboard operator. He said he had the state police on the phone and wanted to talk to me. He was real frantic when he got on the phone and said that there's 3 UFOs over the north tower of the Mackinac Bridge. So I immediately, turned on the radar. When they asked if I had it on radar, I told them no. It's more of a programmed response, thinking back to Klamath Falls, where you're told you don't talk about it, you don't write it down, you don't discuss it. And in the meantime, I called NORAD and told them, and they looked it up, and they said, oh, it's coming up, they're going up I-75. I said, yes, at about 70, 80 miles an hour. Now, about halfway between St. Nicholas and Sault Ste. Marie, there's Kinchlow Air Force Base, which is a SAC base, which they have B-52 bombers. They had 2, apparently, that were on final approach, and that crosses I-75. And so apparently they diverted those 2 bombers because they didn't want, if they have nuclear weapons or not, but they didn't want to take a chance on them meeting UFOs about the same altitude crossing the highway. So they diverted the 2 B-52s. It was a real eye-opener how deep the secrecy goes, how deep the cover-up is.
Enrique Colbic is a senior air traffic controller at Mexico City International Airport. He testifies that up to the current day, that these objects are tracked on radar at Mexico City International, moving at extraordinary speeds, and at times as many as 12 to 15 of them have been seen on radar at the same time. They are being visually seen by pilots and, in one case, photographed by civilians. He also states that one event involved 32 air traffic controllers who saw the same event. These are trained professionals in a very busy international airport.
We have registered information about 12 or 15 echoes at the same time. A lot of pilots in reports when immediately to have an sighting, to have problems with his instruments of flight, precisely the electronic instruments. The pilots reports the size of these objects around 100 meters or greater. Our radar, and at the same time, like in other radars in the world, doesn't detect light. Only objects, solid objects flying. That is very important. We have two Mexican aircrafts flying, bound to the, coming from the north to the airport, flying to land. When one of them reports to have inside a small object of red color flying faster and passing beside him very fast, and the aircraft that was flying behind of the first reports to have another more inside, and they have visual contact with these three different objects, different color. Was red, and the other two white. Around 32 controllers have the same sighting, the same phenomenon inside. This kind of phenomenon appears sometimes 12 times a day, 12 times a the month, or at the week. This phenomenon, of course, doesn't count with a flight plan. Nobody knows nothing about them. Appears when they want to appear.
Chuck Sorrells is a career Air Force military man who was at Edwards Air Force Base in 1961 when not one, but at least 7 UFOs were over Edwards Air Force Base airspace, moving in extraordinary nonlinear fashion at enormous speeds, making right-hand turns and other maneuvers which no known aircraft could do. They were on radar, they were seen visually, and a special UFO officer scrambled and authorized a jet to intercept these objects. They were present between 1:30 a.m. and dawn, meaning that this event lasted for 5 or 6 hours.
At about 1:30 or so in the morning, I noticed this real bright light to the east of my field, and it was kind of a light green, I would describe it, and it had a red light underneath it, and the red light, it wasn't actually a flashing light, it's kind of, I'd say, pulsating type, probably be a better description of it, red underneath, and it had a white like light on top that just glowed. And I had the one of the detachment guys from the interceptor detachment that was on the base there, had the captain down there, got him awake and got him to go out and look at it. And yeah, what is that, you know? And so we talked about it for a while, RAPCON people, that's radar people that on the base, they didn't have any aircraft in the area at the time.